Welcome to Huddle Up with Matias Bueno. Today's guest is sports broadcaster, author, and co-host of the Footy Prime Show, Brendan Dunlop. Brendan, thanks for joining us today. I'm super excited to talk footy with you, man.
Hey man, I was already excited, and then I saw the jersey wall behind you. And now I'm ready to go. You even got a Santa Clara kid up there, man. That's outstanding.
Now I can say that I was not a bandwagon jumper because I remember seeing them from their, Segunda Liga days before they made it back to the top division. But first things first, you've embarked on a ginormous project recently with one of the greatest Canadian footballers ever, Dwayne De Rosario, and you helped to create just an absolute masterpiece of a book, D-Ro's life and embarking on the journey of being an author and adding more tools to the toolkit of all of the sorts of things you've done already in your career. Talk about what inspired you to start the project and what that process was like going through, I'm sure, so many stories and tons of months of hard work.
Hey, thanks, man. Yeah, it was an incredible feat. The first major writing project I ever embarked on. My background in media has almost been exclusively been in TV and radio, but I've always had an interest in writing. I've always read a lot. I've read a lot of biographies growing up. I read Sports Illustrated. I've got my hands on ESPN, the magazine. I always had a real interest in writing. I just never did very much of it professionally. So when Dwayne retired, we had the same agent at the time. And someone had said to me when I was at the Score, Rob Pizzo, I forget who it was we were reacting to, but there was some television personality that come out with a book. It was a hockey book, but I truly don't remember the name. But I remember saying to Rob, like, oh, I didn't know he wrote books. He goes, yeah, I didn't either. But you know what? I'd like to write one day. And I said, well, why? Are you a writer? And he goes, no, but I just think like it's an incredible feat. And if I was able to conquer it, like I feel like I can do anything. So it's one of those like bucket list, maybe one day down the road things. And so that's kind of stayed in my head as I progressed in my career, I guess. And when Ken Reed, who I worked with at Sports Central forever, wrote a book, he's written 7 now, they're all Canadian bestsellers, but his first book was Hockey Card Stories. And I remember going to the after party, a few people from the office to have a beer and congratulate him. And he'd come over and he signed a bunch of copies, I think. And he turns to me and he says, hey, Dunlop, when you write a book about the Bundesliga or whatever, I'll be there and I'll buy one. And he's not the biggest soccer guy. So I walked away from that moment and thought, oh, I don't know if I'll write a book about the Bundesliga, but geez, Kenny, maybe I should write a book. And at that exact same time, Dwayne had retired. So I just kind of felt like that was the perfect kind of idea. So I made contact with Dwayne and approached him about it and pitched the idea. Neither of us had embarked on a project quite like that. So timeline was a bit flexible. We both kind of knew that. So it was a long process for us. We started in 2016. So COVID delayed things a little bit, but it's a 4-year plus project for the two of us. A lot of hours. We would sit down at a Joey's restaurant. Usually it was quite often a Joey's, a couple different locations, but popular chain in Toronto. We would meet, which is kind of halfway distance between where he lived in the suburbs and where I lived in the city. And we would meet for an hour, maybe 90 minutes, 2 hours. And I would just try to, extract as much about his life and his playing stories and his life stories as they could. And then, put that into 72,000 words in a book. It was pretty special to finally be able to hold a copy in our hands in March, and for all major outlets in Canada, the States, and UK as well, and most Canadian independent bookstores too. And the reception's been fantastic so far, and Dwayne's been great on the media tour. So yeah, just kind of living it up and looking forward to being able to actually have a celebratory party in person and toast to that.
It's just been such an amazing time over a span of 4 years to embark on all the stories and, like you said, sit down for an hour at a time. That reminds me of the quote that Will Smith, I think, has said about building a house and you go brick by brick, and that's how you are able to obtain massive success. And people think that it's just one silver bullet or quantum leap moment, when in reality, I didn't even know that you had been doing that for 4 years. I saw it this year. I was like, wow, this is incredible. How long does it take to write a book? It's probably maybe a year or two tops. Like, it's not that long, I guess. But then you talk about 4 years, 5 years, like that's just wow.
Yeah,
it is.
It could have been. It probably could have been a year or two. But as things worked out, I do think that sometimes, a lot of times in life, things don't work out the way we think that they should or expect them to. But I truly believe more often than not, things work out the way they're supposed to. So, a lot of things kind of happened in both of our lives across that period. His life changed. He's a father. His his wife had moved to New York, where she's American, and she'd moved to New York and relocated with a couple of kids who were pursuing opportunities in the States as well. So the family dynamic kind of changed for him. I got married during that time period. His father was also very ill. His father kind of tragically passed away right at the beginning of COVID from cancer. And so we were able to include that in the book. So on the original timeline, we wouldn't have been. So I think that, I'm happy in a way. It's a true blessing the way that timing worked out, that we got to include that, because his father, Tony, was such a key figure, an important part of his life. And if we weren't able to, kind of tie the bow on that, to get that part in, then there would be a big hole left in the story. So you really do get a truly complete story for as long as it took, and as many hours as Dwayne and I both probably wished it didn't take as long as it did. I do think you truly got a complete, proper story and look at his life.
So now that the process and the journey has finally been completed, at least on this project, doing the book with Dwayne, what was the feeling like for you after it was all said and done?
Yeah, I was excited for people to read it. I mean, to hear a lot of the stories and be the only one that had heard a lot of these, personal stories from outside off of the football pitch. I felt like I was holding on to this, incredible secret. I couldn't tell anybody, and I really wanted people to be able to see another side to him. He goes into a lot of detail about what happened at Toronto FC. He's very candid and open and honest about the beauty and the ugly side of professional sports. So that was pretty eye-opening for me. He also had quite a traumatic experience that kind of helped shape his life as a child, or as a teen, I should say. He grew up in Scarborough, which is a difficult part of Toronto, an underserved neighborhood in Toronto, and where I actually lived for 10 years through university. And we only lived 3 kilometers away from each other, or from where he grew up, but it was light years apart, our experiences, and nothing at all alike whatsoever. So for me to learn a little bit more about that, I was very curious about in beginning to do the story, and then realizing, how much that really kind of shaped him as a person. And yeah, he had this one moment with a gun put to his head, and thankfully he came out without serious injury from that altercation, but it really did shape his life, because if that hadn't happened, he may not have chosen soccer. He may not have gone down that path. He may have been pulled in by the street life that was so close to getting him and sucking him in for good. So it was interesting for me to hear that story, and then as the process went on, complete the whole book, to realize what a pivotal moment that particularly was, because it really was a crossroads for him to choose, okay, should I really buckle down and try and pursue football as a professional career? Is that something that I could actually do with my life? Or the easier choice would have been what, all he ever really knew, and the street life and the hustle that was around him. So he chose soccer, and the result was that Canada got one of the most incredible athletes, in any sport ever. And Major League Soccer got an incredible face of the league for so long, who really was one of the founding fathers of, now what is continuing to grow into one of the biggest leagues in the world.
I remember as a kid, whenever I would go to the library and play backyard soccer, the game on the computer is the only thing you really had access to for entertainment. And Dwayne De Rosario, he was one of the best players. He was one of the only players you could play as in the game. And for me, growing up in that era when I was first discovering watching soccer, I was around 10, 11 years old, and he was like the face of the Canadian men's team. He was a face, or one of the most prominent faces in the MLS at the time, a league which was very, very tiny compared to what it is now. It almost seems like there's a new team coming up every other week compared to what I remember way back in the day when there was maybe less than 10, something like that. So you mentioned growing up in Scarborough and the difference that 3 kilometers can make between one part of the area, versus the other. And even the time I spent in Toronto, knowing people say, oh, Scarborough is hood and it can be dangerous, it can be sketchy. But whenever I went around certain areas of Scarborough, I'm like, oh, it's not that bad. But again, I didn't know the entire area. And if you don't go looking for trouble, then it's different compared to certain areas where when you're growing up, it can be rougher. It can be a lot more difficult, that day-to-day life. And to see what he blossomed into, knowing where he came from, is just what makes his story, I think, even more incredible, because I knew that he was one of the best athletes to have ever graced the Canadian men's national team, but especially now adding the layers that you were able to bring in with putting his story into the book, it really just captivates more so for the audience and for the readers that, hey, Dwayne had maybe a different life than what we saw on television. Learn about what he did and what he went through that made him who he was. And I think that's one of the best things that you guys have been able to do with bringing this project to life.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate that. That was very important to him to really show, a full picture, and to also be able to give an example of, just because you start from a place that doesn't seem that great, or there's a lot of problems, doesn't mean you can't, find greatness and individually, turn your life into something that, that you can be very proud of, and that can help other people and have a positive impact. And I think that that's, Dwayne's kind of always been that character, and on the pitch, he's had such a positive impact on the game as well. You look at the way Canadian soccer has evolved. It's truly been a slow evolution. USA 94 for the United States, that absolutely catapulted their national program into a team that expects to make the knockout phases of every single World Cup. And not making the last World Cup in 2018 was such a disaster for the United States. Getting to a World Cup, feels like so far out of reach for Canada, and it has felt for so long. But you look at where things are now, where, when Dwayne was at his peak, there really was only one, maybe two other players that kind of played with the flair and the creativity, the drive, the attacking, presence and ability that he had. Now there's 5 or 6 players like that in the team. And you've got defenders, that play with a flair and a attacking threat and prowess that he had. So I think that, his impact on the evolution of the Canadian soccer game is massive and truly is immeasurable. You look at how important it was for Toronto to bring him home. I like to ask the question, would there be 3 Major League Soccer teams if you didn't have Dwayne De Rosario, who was the face of the league? There might not have been at the time. I think, Toronto coming in and making it a true priority to bring him in. And obviously it didn't work out for plenty of reasons, which he gets into in great detail with a lot of drama in the book. But he was able to come back and finish his career for his hometown club and wear the red shirt. And that was something he's very, very proud of, and will always hold dear to his heart. And, still very much involved in the community. He has a foundation that does a lot of work in Scarborough and similar neighborhoods across Canada, but also work in the Caribbean, the D-Row Foundation, where he's got an academy as well, his D-Row United Football Academy. And being able to kind of use the resources and leverage the power of both has been able to get some kids out of some really, difficult situations and give them opportunity to play, and opportunity to play for scholarships as well. A couple of kids have gone on to play for the Toronto FC Academy and have gone on to play Division I sports in the United States. So his playing days are done, but his impact on the soccer community and his own community are far from over. He's still in the early chapters of that part.
And for many more years, he'll be able to continue to make a large impact, knowing the presence that he's built with everything he's done in his career. And even for someone like yourself, with everything that you've built in your career thus far, I must know, what is one thing that you learned about yourself through this process of writing the book?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I learned about myself that it's okay to ask for help. I think that in our career path, help isn't always available. So there's a feeling that you got to be able to solve everything yourself. The reality is that no one is a master of the whole realm of media. You can't be. You can be a wordsmith. You can be an expert in a certain sport or a certain classification. There's football analysts that very much break down plays. There's football analysts that very much break down scenarios and situations that are more news guys, right? But so when it came to the book, just because I knew enough about Dwayne and enough about soccer to do the book, I still needed a second set of eyes. I still, needed a thesaurus, and sometimes opening a book thesaurus or asking Grammarly just wasn't enough. So I turned and relied on my wife a lot. She's an actor, so she understands she kind of understands the stage that Dwayne played on, and certainly the celebrity status that Dwayne had, and it's kind of understanding of both of our worlds. She helped me tremendously through the book process. So I think, when I started it, it was something I thought, oh, well, I've got Dwayne giving me these great stories to write. I can definitely do this on my own. But truly, I wouldn't have been able to do it without my wife. She helped me tremendously throughout the book, and being hugely supportive. While I was buried in the basement for hours upon hours as we moved. That's another thing. I was working on the deadline just as we'd moved into our first house. So that was a bit of a process and a real balancing act, and she was absolutely tremendous throughout that.
It's always important to have people that can help you out a lot, especially someone like your wife who can really hold you down when you need that help, when you need the resources, because I can't even imagine where you'd begin with writing a book about a story like Dwayne's, let alone doing that while you're moving into your first home in Toronto and what that process is like. Home ownership in Toronto. That's a podcast for another day in and of itself.
Yeah, I did one recently, actually. It was my first time doing a non-sports podcast, and I felt like I kept using cliches. I'm like, well, when we were house hunting, you just want to find the best deal, and you got to give 110% of your search. What am I doing? Why am I speaking in cliches?
That's hilarious. Like, you must have felt like Grant Cardone or something. You're just giving these generic, like, motivational things, and you got to make sure the right price and whatnot, and you got to really do your homework. Like, no, I think I'm just going to spin a wheel and throw a dart and hope that the best home just shows up, and that nobody's entering a bidding war just to get this house either.
Yeah, you could definitely do a whole anthology series of real estate podcasts. Maybe that's the other thing, man. Maybe that's the extension for you next. Maybe it's the real estate radio.
Hey, well, I mean, I'd definitely be open to it if someone's willing to, show me a thing or two, or if I need to reach out and get a little help from my friends, because I know that the lesson you've learned is it can be seen as cliche as well, because nobody is a master of everything, and getting help is super important. And that leads into the next question I was going to ask, a very famous moment in which some jerseys behind me were required to ask for one of the players on this team was required to ask for a little help from his friends in a moment when he couldn't be there. On July 10th, 2016, when Cristiano Ronaldo had to be substituted out of the game in the biggest moment of his career up to that point, bigger than Euro 2004. And all of us Portuguese fans sitting in our basements, wherever we were, watching and praying that they just didn't get scored on. And yet you were there at the Stade de France in Paris. So, Brendan, I must know, what was that experience like? How many times did you have cardiac arrest?
Oh, it still doesn't feel real. That was one of the best days of my life. And I should say, because I know the name doesn't give it away, that I'm half Portuguese. My mother's Portuguese from the continent. And, my introduction to international football was Portugal. They weren't a prominent team for a long time, not until Euro 2000, were they really contending and kicking at tournaments. And 2004 was such a heartbreaker. It was my last year of high school. Everyone knows the story. I won't really go into it, but they should have beaten Greece. And the fact that they didn't, I thought, that must just be cursed, and maybe they'll never win. And then to get to the final in what was not a very good tournament played by the Portuguese, to get to the final and play the hosts, who very much were the favorites, and to have a chance there without Cristiano Ronaldo in extra time. My cousin and I had got tickets. The match was on Sunday. And on the Thursday night before, I'd been trying through some channels and through some friends in professional sports, hoping to be able to get my hands on some tickets some way, somehow. And it looked as though it wasn't going to happen. And so my cousin, Jason, who's Portuguese, we were at the Jays game. The Jays were playing the Tigers. I grew up in Windsor, so I'm a big Tigers fan. I just got to get that in there. So we're sitting there watching the Jays and the Tigers battle. And he says, hey, any luck with those tickets? No, man, I don't think I'm getting any. And he looks on his phone. He says, oh, well, UEFA's releasing like their final batch tomorrow. I'm like, yeah, real UEFA tickets? Like, those will be concert tickets, man. They'll be gone in a second. So the night ends and a few drinks, and I realized, I'm like, you know what? This is my last chance here. I'm going to have to make a go at this UEFA launch here at 6 a.m. Eastern time. So I text every single person that I knew that lived abroad, because I thought I had a better chance, with a foreign phone call or a foreign URL. So friends in England, a friend in Australia, I think an ex-girlfriend in Europe. Like, hey, you think you can, if it's less than 2,000 euros, like, just buy a pair and I'll wire you the money immediately. And sure enough, 6 a.m. comes and I don't wake up. 8 a.m. comes and my phone's buzzing. It's my cousin. Like, oh, hey, Jay, I didn't wait. Do I get 2 or do I get 4? What? Do I get 2 or do I get 4? I got through. Well, it's 8 o'clock. 2 hours have passed. You got through? Yeah. Do I get 2 or do I get 4? Oh man, get 4. We'll figure out what to do with the other to get 4. So we got 4 tickets to the Euro 2016 final, Portugal versus France, on the Friday. We took his dad and his dad's brother-in-law. And we flew out on Saturday night, landed there Sunday morning at 1 o'clock. The match was at 6, and we were back at the airport at noon the next day. So I felt like Drake. I was in Paris for 23 hours, and I got to see Portugal win their first ever title. It was pretty phenomenal.
I'm not gonna lie. I actually thought that you'd just been there in Europe the whole time and it's a coincidence and maybe we'll just scalp a ticket. I didn't know that you had to, turn your birthday into a lifestyle and fly to France and back in less than one day, waking up, getting tickets, waking up to just this blaring phone call. Oh my goodness, like 2 or 4, like just 4. It's like, are you on the Price is Right? Like get 4, get 4. And then you get the tickets and boom, you're there, you watch them when you go back. Like the closest experience I've ever had to that doesn't compare, but getting tickets to the Grey Cup a few days before, going there, watching the Bombers win for the first time in your life, going back the next day, like I thought that was insane. I thought that was a wild ride, driving through the night at 2:00 in the morning, all the way to Calgary, then driving back after the day after the game. But to fly to I thought I was being risky by paying $280 to see the Bombers in a 9-team league play in the Grey Cup, which they had been to 5 times since they last won. But to watch Portugal play in the Euro final, please tell me what the feeling was like at the final was. Oh, okay. Please tell me what the feeling was like at 109 minutes and 120 minutes, because
the whole thing still feels surreal. And we're, 4 years removed, 5 years removed from this. And just to have been there and just for Portugal to get to the final was a win. So for me to get there was like winning the lottery. And then for them to win while I was there in the fashion in which they did, honestly still doesn't feel real. And the cost was considerably more than the drive that you had. If we were able to drive, we may have been able to save some money. But it was it was a very expensive weekend that would have been worth 3 times the cost, because honestly, the experience was immeasurable. And I will say in extra time though, when Adair got the ball and he cut in and he looked behind him and there was no one around and he looks back towards the ball, I'd said to my cousin, don't shoot it. God, don't shoot it. Hold the ball up. Don't shoot it. Wait for help. And he looks down and he shoots it and he picks out the bottom corner past Hugo Lloris. And it was unbelievable. I shot up. We were in a spot near the halfway line, actually, in the third deck, but towards the halfway line. So we were encouraged or required to be sat for the match. But of course, it was impossible to sit at a moment like that. And I leaped up, but I leaped forward so hard as the French man in front of me had leaned back, gasping, and I clocked him in the back of the head. I felt so bad, and it was an immediate, and God bless him, because he knew I didn't do it on purpose, and he knew I had a moment to celebrate. So you can imagine, oh my God, are you okay? Oh my God, they scored! Everyone was cheering, and we were just holding our breath to get to the final whistle. And my cousin, who's a massive fan, but I don't think as connected to it wasn't as connected to Portugal, the Seleção anyway, for as long as I've been. But when the final whistle went, he was in tears on my shoulder. So it was so special just to be in the stadium for that, and to be around so many Portuguese people who have watched Portugal come so close quite a few times and not be able to do it, and to do it in truly unthinkable circumstances, and have Ronaldo retire when he does retire eventually as the best player and the best coach of all time because of that moment on the sidelines there. I think that's pretty special.
There's no other way that you really could have put it more beautifully, quite honestly, because you're right. Portugal have been so close more times than people would even know. 1984, 2000, 2004, 2012, 4 times.
No, you skipped 2006 when they lost to Zidane in France in the semifinals. I thought Portugal-Italy final. That was supposed to happen.
At least for the Euro. Now for the World Cup, 66 and 06, of course, are the semis that they came close in. But just thinking about the Euro and how much harder it can actually be because you're playing better teams. Mm-hmm. And the way that the game was set up and when it was done, it almost made me feel like, it was meant to happen. You talk earlier in the podcast about how sometimes things work out better than you even thought. I remember for many years, Euro 2004 were cursed. It wasn't meant to be, because I started watching soccer 2 years after that. So my first look back in history was they lost a final to who? How? At home? And then when they beat France, the hosts, huge underdogs, with the unsung hero, Eder Lopes, scoring the game winner in the 109th minute. I remember I was sitting there alone in my basement saying, shoot though, like, come on, let's go. And then the second it went in, I'm surprised the glass in my house didn't break. But
It still doesn't feel real. There's some blank space on the wall behind me, and I've commissioned an artist friend actually to draw a picture of Adair striking the ball. So I'm gonna get that put behind me for this Zoom shot that I got going on. But yeah, it truly was, unbelievable, and a moment that Portuguese people everywhere will never forget because it's so unexpected.
Well, Brendan, we've reached the end of our episode for today. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate having been on. It was super awesome to talk about the process of writing the book, working with Dwayne, the impact that he's had, talking about the impact of the Euro 2016 final. It just sets me on fire to talk about these kinds of things, storytelling and the Seleção, of course.
Yeah, and I'm happy to come on and tell some more stories anytime, man. But let's end on this then, your prediction, because when, talk about timing, how things are supposed to work out. Last year, when the tournament was supposed to be held in 2020, and when the groups were drawn, Portugal looked like they'd be lucky to finish third and get out of the group. Now I'm looking at them against Germany and France and the rest of the teams at Euros, and honestly, I think Portugal can win the whole tournament.
AJ had said he thought after Euro 2016 that Portugal's team for the next tournament would be even better than the one that had just passed, and they can do it. They did really well in the UEFA Nations League, and for some reason I was like, I don't know if it's just because I started following Canal 11 on Instagram or what, but I was like, oh, it's just Portuguese people, boosting themselves. But no, they have a lot of great young players that have started to come up amongst the ranks in EPL and across, La Liga and Bundesliga, and to see what they've done club-wise, and now to see what they've done collaboratively for the Seleção, they can win it for sure. It's just a matter of how they play on the road. That's going to be the biggest question.
This squad in 2021 is better than the squad they would have taken in 2020. And that is exceptional and incredible. So I'm very excited, and very professional of you to, try and be unbiased and look at it. Well, things got to go their way, but let's be honest. They're one of the favorites, and it's going to be great if they do it again.
If they do it again, then somehow double shot the night before, all the way to London, wherever it is. If you can do it again somehow, then I will write a book about your journey to 2 Euro finals to watch Portugal win back to back.
That would be the title of the book. Yeah, I don't feel like I have any other captivating titles at the moment, but if I was able to make that happen and fly to Wembley like Drake for 23 hours again, that would be pretty special. And I think, two flights, 2 European championships, the title of Brendan Dunlop's autobiography.
Brendan, thank you again so much for being on today's episode. And thank you for listening to our episode today with sports broadcaster, author, as well as the co-host of Footy Prime, Brendan Dunlop.